enough. As good enough.
Welcome to our weekly podcast, Good Enough, with your co-hosts, Sam Lewis and Mark Lips. Our goal on Good Enough is to interview guests who do not let being perfect keep them from achieving their dreams. Whether it be writing a book, growing a business, achieving some other success, all of these people are heartfelt, passionate, and good enough to be noticed and guests on our podcast. We welcome them, and we also thank you for joining us today.
Son of a bitch.
Hi, Sam. What'd you say, Sam? What'd you say?
I said son of a bitch.
Okay.
I forgot to hit the record button once again.
Yeah, we just had a great conversation, listeners. I got to tell you, it should have been there. Should have been there. But anyway, welcome to Good Enough. I'm Mark Lips, and this is my co-host,
Sam Lewis, in Bloomington, Illinois.
Yep, and home of the eclipse.
Just got back from the eclipse.
Yeah, wow.
I should have wore glasses. I should have wore solar glasses.
Right. I'm still seeing there's some kind of flare in my eye.
Who knew that dot would last that long?
But anyway, we're brought to you by Happy Friday Neighbors, which is a newsletter I've been doing for 25 plus years. You're welcome to join, listeners. Just text me or email me at Mark with a K, mark@marklips.com, mark@marklips.com. Also, the Ripe Choice Farm Stay and Catering here in Northern California. Sam?
And from this side of the country, Good Enough is brought to you by Pride Staff, a full-service staffing company. We do direct hire, temp to hire, recruiting, and by the Finally Friday Philosophy, Sammy's Substack of curated, I don't know what, but I try to entertain myself, and I hope I entertain others. But the PPP is better known as.
I love that. You're much more esoteric than I am. Mine is, like I always say, it's built for a third grader to read. Yours is, pictures and stuff like that. Yours is
pictures.
Let's get deep. Let's be deep. But you do have Mike's Friday Funnies, which is pretty good.
Yeah, so Mike does a good job of curating those jokes, and I like how he, they're by theme. I don't know if I'm sure everybody noticed that they're by theme, and they're really good. But
I love it. I've lifted a few of those. So.
And he's been doing that for tens of years.
Where is he?
He's in Peoria, Illinois.
Oh, okay. So he's near you. Did he used to work with you?
I'm waving at your wife behind you, Mark. I don't know what she's doing, but
she's fiddling around.
She always tries to get on scene.
Relaxation for her to do what she's doing right now. Still involves moving, but it's relaxing for her. Her birthday's coming up, Sam, April 16th.
Oh, cool.
And boys, sans me, this is her 60th, right? So it's a big deal. But of course, if we invited, no. They are sending her to Calistoga for a couple of nights at a couple of days at a retreat there, spa retreat and all of that.
She's not 60.
I know. I don't either. I try to act like she's 25. She won't have anything to do with it. Not like when she was 25. That's what, I was going, what the hell? Just wait, are we on? Are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording. Unfortunately, we are recording now. But we can edit later.
Okay, good. So listen, I'm excited about this guest of yours. As we said, you mentioned a couple of books. Listeners, we got this, we have a guest on, an author who, and you'll hear more about it once we get him on here, but I mean, he literally has written a book that takes you on a journey, and throughout that journey, he inserts all of life's positive principles, most of them anyway. And I mean, it's really, you think, okay, I'm not big into self-help books or anything like that. But this is, you're taking this journey with this guy and you're going, oh, wow, that's cool. That's cool. Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. And it'll actually make you remember times when maybe you learned that lesson. And also, Sam, I got to tell you that what I loved about it, being here in Northern California and having not been in Southern Illinois or Illinois in that part of the woods for a long time, is I recognize all those towns.
Oh, yeah. Well, you think about me, and my whole family worked on the Illinois Central. My dad was a ticket agent in Centralia.
Oh, that's right.
My Uncle Hallie, you know, Brent's dad, he could have been that conductor. He was on that line forever.
Wow.
So, you know, when he's talking about them, I'm not seeing a train. I'm seeing people I know.
No, that's nice. Yeah, my grandfather worked in the railroads. He quit school in the 3rd grade to help make money for his family and went to work on the railroad. 3rd grade. Imagine that.
By then, you should be at least smoking.
Yeah, you should be
smoking roll your own. Back then, you ain't smoking by the end of 3rd grade.
Oh, yeah, I just learned to read.
Yeah. Listener, Mark just rolled one. Imaginative. I'm hoping it's a cigarette, but
I think it was a cigarette, but I don't know.
It could have been left-handed. It might have been a left-handed cigarette.
Camel, filterless Camel, you know.
Hey, it's 4 o'clock. Let's go meet Dave.
Okay. See you
and
there.
Don't let me forget to hit record.
All right, will do.
Hey, Mark, you ready to meet my friend Dave?
I am ready. I'm excited about this guy. This is great.
You and him have something in common, Mark. Chamber of Commerce.
We have a couple of things actually in common. I've taken a train before. Chamber of Commerce and Tom Ziegler. So,
Dave, are you there?
Dave.
There he is.
Dave.
Coming through.
I love it. I love it. Hey, I'm Mark Lips. Nice to meet you, Dave.
Mark, terrific to meet you as well.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I started to look at your book. I said, "Oh, is this a self-help book? I don't want to read it. Not if no one dies, I'm not interested." And so then I started reading. I said, "Oh, this is a journey, man. I love journeys." We just had an author on who did a journey that was fascinating, and then as I started reading it, the life lessons came out. Because I guess I didn't read the description. I just started reading, right? and then it dawned on me, oh my gosh, this is awesome. This is awesome. So, and it's really true, right? I mean, you did that journey.
I did. As a matter of fact, the journey took 61, going to be 62 years.
Oh, I'm talking about the train ride. Did you really meet those guys?
As a matter of fact, those are compilations of people that I've met over my period of time. I actually took the train, Mark, from New Orleans to Chicago February 1st as part of the research, but the characters are written based on people that I've met, stories that I know that are in my heart and in my head. Some of them are compilations and others are, people that fit the bill.
You know, it's interesting, Sam, Sam, you got to jump in because I tell you, Dave, I will dominate here because it really is a fun read. Because I'm an explorer, a historian at heart, and I love trains, taking trains, traveling. But our last guest author that we had on, it was interesting. He said the difference between traveling by either backpacking or by train or by bus and taking an airplane is one sends you to your destination and the other is an actual journey.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mark. I would agree with that. And to a certain degree, taking the back roads by car falls into a similar category. If you remember your family vacation that you traveled to, think about even the vacation movie. Got to go through St. Louis. You got to meet Aunt Edna, and that experience in the desert before you get to Wally World. And
Right.
and it's those things, that journey, that makes for memories.
Dave, I got a ton of questions. How long have I known you? 10,
Let's see,
15?
we moved to Bloomington 2003. I went to work for Harlan 2004. So probably shortly thereafter. So almost,
Long time.
yeah.
And, I didn't know you had, first question, I want to back it up. Playing catch with playing with the enemy.
Playing with the enemy.
And we had him at the sales group meeting.
We
and
did.
So you're telling me, I read in the book, I mean, he passed away?
He did. He passed away a couple of
Oh,
years
no.
ago, had terrible stomach cancer, fought to the end, just one of those people that was as positive. In fact, he had a syndicated article each week about positivity on Fridays, and just one of those great characters.
Mark, he came to, Dave and I and some other gentlemen had a sales club where we lamented about being sales guys and, and vented and suckered each other for the whole, but he came and talked to us. He had a book.
Bring this up. I hope you're going to bring this
Yeah,
up.
we are. But he had a book. I bought his book, read his book, interesting book. It's kind of based on real life stuff. But in Dave's book, Echoes from the Track, he mentions this character, this guy that wrote the book, and I was like, well, that's the same guy.
Yeah, in fact, the dedication is written. If I read the dedication, it's pretty simple. It dedicated those friends and family members who went before me, some too soon, some in old age, all as God intended. Gary, I'm looking forward to hearing another story from you someday. And that's the Gary that we're talking about.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
that brings me to my real question is partly, what I didn't know you had any writer aspirations, and I've known you for a while, but I don't know if we ever went down that path, but obviously something inspired you to write the book. We had that author in common. So I'm just curious, how all these things came together.
Yeah, it's really a simple story. I came from interested in writing for a long time, and had an idea for a book. In fact, we can get to it if you get to chapter 8. But I had written a lot of things that I had electronically crumpled up and said, this isn't very good, and I just don't have the right characters. It just doesn't fit. And I just parked it. It was the only writing idea I had beyond, the work that I do with my business. And on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I had this idea for an outline because I had had a really bad travel experience. Landed me to Dallas that I was going to have to spend 2 nights overnight. Coming back from Colorado, got me to Louisville, ended up taking a Greyhound bus. And this idea of stopping multiple places came to mind, and I just wrote that down. And on Thursday of Thanksgiving, I came back home, did a little bit of research on Amtrak stops, and just said New Orleans, Chicago, 18 stops. And I cut and pasted the train schedule onto a Word document, and I wrote an introduction. I just typed for maybe a half hour, a couple pages, and I parked it. And I came back on Friday morning, and I continued to type through the weekend. And by Sunday night, I had 10 chapters.
Wow.
At the end of Friday of that following week, the book was complete. I mean, I didn't really do any additional writing to the book, some edits, but the book was done in less than 10 days.
Well, I think I told you, Dave, that that book kind of means something a little more special to me because my family all worked on the Illinois Central.
Sure.
And, when you say Centralia, that my dad was the ticket agent in Centralia for years and years. And when you say Mac, the conductor, all I can see is my Uncle Hallie, who was the conductor on that very train for years and years and years. So when you say those people, I see people, I see these people. So that had another special little ring for me. Mark, you were going to. You had your hand up, Mark. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Dave, did you use any AI on this book at all?
No, the only AI I used actually was in the title process. We couldn't come up with a title, and we had lots of options, and none of them really sounded good. They weren't catchy enough. And one of the things, as it's turned out, it's an odd thing because I missed it because of the spelling. Tracking, something along those lines. Everything that you'd search on tracking has to do with tracking down criminals or hunting animals. They're tracking hunting. And I thought tracking, that's where we're going with this. And nothing ever materialized. So I started doing some AI with the summary that I had put together. I didn't even use the AI for the summary itself. And all of a sudden, a series of titles came up.
I like it.
I sent the list to my peer group readers, and ultimately we landed on what we got.
And that's how AI should be used, Sam.
Now, see, I wish. Usually, Mark, the last question he asks at the end of this session is, "Will AI kill us?" I don't care who we're talking to. They got like 2 minutes or less to answer the question. Will AI kill us? So now we've got that out of the way, I hope.
And we got the discipline of writing, because I would love to write a book, and I've got stories.
Well, you can't really tell most of your stories in public, Mark. So
I know, but there are some. I'd water it down. It wouldn't be half as exciting as the real thing, but it just takes a discipline, doesn't it? But you really got onto something and just couldn't stop and worked through the weekend. I mean,
I did. I really, if I talked about the time investment, most authors will tell you that it's 500 to 2,000 hours. And I've invested writing no less than and no more than 100 hours.
Yeah, but that's a little like Jack Kerouac, said he wrote on the road in what, a week, or that he actually wrote it in a week, but he said it took him a lifetime to write it.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
That's kind of how I felt about your book. Yeah, there's a lot more in here, and but I had a question about this, because throughout the book, 1914 plays, and I'm like, where is he going with this? And then you get to
that kind of, because I was reading fast. That kind of just threw me there for a second. Wait a second, what happened? Did I miss something? What's going on?
Well, I you tie it up at the end, but I'm not familiar with that book, Modern Marketing Methods and Salesmanship.
Yeah,
I was like, man, I've read them all. What's he talking about? Is that a made up book?
It is not. It's a leather-bound book. It's a compilation by a number of writers that at the time, 1914, were thinking it's modern. There's new technology. The telephone was coming along. Automobiles were replacing the rail lines for salesmen, but still the communication isn't what it is today. And I picked the book up actually at Books for Benefit in Bloomington.
Really?
Oh yeah, and there were actually a couple of other volumes to it, but I didn't pick those up. I just picked up this one. It would have been, nice to have the whole set, but there wasn't a whole set there. So I just took the one that had to do with sales, and I've had it parked for a long time. But when you look at the significance of 1914, there was a lot of technology that was starting to come out. A couple that I mentioned in the book, neon signs, as an example, for advertising, were just starting to come around into more rural places like Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis. They were used in New York, obviously. They were used in Chicago and some of the bigger cities, obviously in big cities in Europe. But to use those in a small town environment, they weren't there. And so that became a focus for me. And if you, again, go back in history, I touch on it within the book, it's about 50 years from the close of the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And things hadn't changed all that much from a racial perspective in the South. And that to me seemed important to touch on, or at least draw out when it comes to life lessons, not just business lessons.
Yeah, I thought that was a wonderful aspect of the book. And, bringing up, you never think about this, but like the telephone, the building only have one phone because we don't get phone calls because nobody else has a phone.
Right.
Or the plumber that suddenly they discovered indoor toilets and his business takes off.
Yeah, is booming.
We think about AI driving economics. We never think about indoor plumbing making people rich.
Yeah, but okay, we're going to stay off AI for right now. But
so what was your kind of challenges of the writing process? I mean, you kind of described how you wrote it, but I mean, did you have a peer group or anything that you could check in? I mean, I don't want, I mean, you and I talked a little bit on the side about how some help you got. Maybe I want to ask that question. Like, can you tell us about some of the support you had to make this book become a reality, so to speak?
Sure. Mark, did you want to clarify?
Well, no, I mean, he mentioned before that he was using a peer group to bounce things off of, which is, I think, great. I guess, how did you pick that peer group? Where they come from, the sales industry, or
when I got to the end of the book, the only people that had read it were my wife and myself, and the litmus test had to go someplace beyond that. And so I selected some friends, some business associates that knew me for 5, 10, 20 years or more in some cases, a couple family friends. And I said, would you mind reading this? And what's interesting about the process for those that are interested in the process was that I asked them if they wanted 3 chapters or 8 chapters. And some of them said 3, some of them said 8. But my thinking behind it was, if I give them the entire book and they look at it and they go, it's 80 pages of manuscript type, I'm not going to be able to read all that. Then they're just going to park it. And so in giving them the choice of 3 or 8, and the chapters aren't that long.
Good idea.
But my thinking, Mark, was that if I gave them 3 chapters and they got to the end of the 3rd chapter and they said, yeah, I want more, that was a test in and of itself. And so then I gave them the next 5 chapters. And when they got to chapter 8, then I gave them the end of the book if they got to that point. And all of them did get to the end of the book. So then I was looking for general critique, general things like, is it a page turner? Will it be of interest to an audience? Who might that audience be? Because I really didn't write it for an audience. And we honed in on that from a genre perspective. I really believe that people that are riding commuter rails in big cities, New York, Chicago, DC, Philadelphia, Boston, they're looking for an hour or 2 of escape. They're not necessarily looking for that life lessons book that at the end of the chapter, I got to go do something. They're looking for the rest of the story. And I feel like that's the audience that I wrote for. I also believe, if you look at the title, there's a hint of an airplane that's coming out of the echoes. And the main character is heading to the airport and this flight gets canceled. Well, many of us have had airline flight, challenges. We're sitting at the airport looking for something to do. We're looking on Kindle or something to read. And my hope was that they would be able to find this entertaining for those, flight commuters.
Wow. I think this book, this would be a good book. This would be a great book for high school or college. One, for a couple of reasons. One, to try to take some of these life lessons to heart in a way that doesn't sound like you're preaching, because it's a journey. 2, to show that, because I've always said this to my kids, stay in an athletic stance, keep moving, because if you just stand there still, you're just going to run into the same situations. You need to get out and about and run into, have experiences. And that's where you begin to learn and be educated, and you know, you know, that's where it's how we got to get rid of racism, get more people traveling and embracing other cultures and all of that. I think that would be a good book for. I know I would have my kids read it.
I appreciate you saying that. One of the things, and I'm holding up my phone here, is that today all of us are challenged with the amount of information we have in our phone. We're sitting at a dinner table and a pop-up shows up, a beep alerts us. But especially for the younger generation that you're talking about, they've grown up with that technology, since they were 5 years old.
Yeah.
We didn't have that as a kid. We were out getting our knees scraped and our bikes dirty, and the playground pickup games were going on. Kids today, high school or even younger, college students, that art of interaction just doesn't take place the way it used to. And I think you're right that the one character comes to mind, and that's Jackson on the train.
Mm-hmm.
He's sitting in the airport or in the train station. He's gone to New Orleans for an interview, and he's slept on a chair or bench overnight, and all of a sudden he finds himself interacting with Charlie. Well, it comes about kind of in a startling way, much the same way each of us in our mind goes through. We look at people off in a distance, and we start to make stories up in our heads. Where do they come from? Where are they going? What's their background? And Jackson catches them doing that, kind of staring at him, and calls him on it. And I didn't mean to do that. And all of a sudden, a fast friendship begins between the two of them, and 2 generations apart. Jackson's young enough to be his Charlie's grandson, and he's able to take to heart some of the things that that Charlie presents in a pretty easy fashion.
Well, you talk about life lessons, several in this book, and I mean, when I read, of course, what I know everybody knows this, but what I had to grin when you talked about the 4 Ds. I mean, it's something I learned, thank God, in my 30s. Like, man, that is the best thing ever. But what's your favorite of all these things you put in there, if you have one?
I think what I intertwined in the book, one of the life lessons, is the idea of punctuality. The idea of Lombardi time is brought up a couple times, and maybe more than one. But a good friend of mine, who is actually one of my readers, sent his blog post today, and he was visiting in Chicago, and he missed his commuter train by 30 seconds. And he was mad at himself. He was angry that, oh man, I got to wait for the next train. But when he realized that it was the circumstances that got him there, he should have been there 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early. And I think all of us know that and recognize that, but we try to fit one more thing in.
That's me. Tammy says I'm late for everything because I try to get one more little thing in. Also, Dave, I think like Jackson, there are spin-off stories that could tell more of life lessons. Like, this is Jackson beginning, right? Then he goes to the next level, and he's got his family. And
one of the things, Mark, and maybe you picked up on this, maybe both of you picked up on this, is that the idea of a book creates imagination. And when we're watching TV or we're watching a movie, we're presented with the dialogue. We're presented with the look and feel of the character. We're presented with the scenery that's behind there. And in the book, in most good fiction or even some nonfiction work, you're left wondering. Your mind is exploring. What does Jackson look like? What does dinner for he and his wife to celebrate a job win? what does that feel like? And the imagination, the creativity of that imagination is what fiction's all about. And intertwined are the realist, the real stories that, Sam, you mentioned the 4Ds, the do, drop, delay, and delegate. Those are pillars for good management and good business today. But in the backdrop are these characters and who I purposely didn't go too deep in because I wanted you to be thinking about those backstories, Mark. I wanted you to wonder what happened to that person when they stepped off the train.
Well, that's always the power of a good graphic novel. You only have so many panels. And to get a person from one panel to the next, you have to use their imagination.
Hey, for our listeners' benefit, Dave, I don't know if we properly set you up or not.
You probably didn't.
Where to find it?
Sure.
All of that.
Yeah. Again, I'm the president of a local chamber of commerce in Greater Cincinnati called Colerain, Colerain. But I have 40 years of business experience from Chicago to Bloomington to across the country with hundreds, if not thousands, of client interactions over a 40-year period. And I didn't aspire to be an author. In fact, I haven't even put author on my LinkedIn profile to this point. The book just got published, Echoes Across the Tracks. It was just published last Thursday. We were able to make it to the #1 bestseller genre of business travel. And I'm excited about that. But more importantly, just having something published, to have a physical book. I got my first copy on Friday. And to hold it in my hand is fun.
Yeah, I love that. Golly, would I love to have that experience. So I need to do that. Sam, would you help me write a book?
Yeah, I just need to. I'm sort of like you, Mark. I just need to get the thing. I got enough writing. I just need to get it done.
I need to get it organized. So
we'll put all the connection stuff, Dave, in our on our podcasts and our
I love
website.
the title. I love the title.
So who was Mac? I mean, all I can see is my Uncle Hallie. I mean, uniform and everything. He wore to work.
Mac is a sage. Mac is a sage. He's the glue.
Yes, he is absolutely the glue. And the description fits my great grandfather, who, if you get to the final explanation at the end, I did decide to do that. I had thought about not doing it and leaving it out, but I won't spoil the whole story. But my great grandfather and I never got to meet. He was born in 1889, died in 1962 in March. I was born in July of 62, so I never got to meet him. But through my great grandmother, who told stories of his experiences on the train tracks, experiences with hobos who had jumped the tracks and made that made that train. Those interactions were someplace deep inside of me, and as I started to write, I needed some character development and some consistency throughout the train. Amtrak does not have a conductor that runs the entire route.
No,
they actually change positions at different stops. And the purpose for that is rest. They need to get a good night's rest. And so there are 3 segments between Chicago and New Orleans. And so it would not be consistent for Mac to get all the way.
I was going to call you out on that, but I thought I would just let it. But you ratted yourself out. So.
Oh no! But the point is, and to Mark's point, is that if you're really reading the story, you recognize that he does have spiritual qualities, and like God, probably doesn't need any sleep at all. And so therefore he can be there. Some of the language that he uses, again, I won't ruin anything by saying this, but if you pay attention to the dialogue, he's the only character that refers to Charlie as Charles, and he never refers to him as Charlie in the book. And that's the formal aspect of the interaction between the two of them. And again, that's intended. Everybody else is on a.
Well, I certainly got it, but I knew from Hallie, my uncle, that he never went the full. He went, I forget, he would go from, I don't remember what the breaks are, but he would get off the train and go to the hotel. Next morning, he'd get up and he'd ride the train back the other way.
Yep.
And that's how they did it. But it was obvious that you were using Mac as a metaphor, or not a metaphor, maybe.
I wish now, so listeners, great book. It's a journey. Pick it up on Amazon. But train travel. I wish they made trains more affordable. I know they've got to be expensive to run. I mean, you could jump on a plane and get there for probably half the cost, or you look for some special or something going on. But I got to tell you, train rides and anything along those lines is just so much more exciting and interesting. It is going to take you a longer time, but I looked at doing this once when I lived in Chicago, and Tammy and I wanted to take a train. We wanted to get somewhere. Maybe it was California. I don't remember where we wanted to go at the time. And he said, how wonderful to take a train. Well, the train ride was like $1,000. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I could fly there and for 200,
Right. Well, here's the thing, Mark, and this again, you get to talking to me offline at length about the Amtrak. They're trying to make it easier for their riders. They have what's called the USA Rail Pass now, where you can book up to 10 segments between point A and point B for $500. And I think it was on sale last month for 10% off. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
So you can book Chicago to Denver, get to Denver, explore Denver all you want, book Denver to Los Angeles, explore Los Angeles all you want, take Los Angeles to Seattle as a next route.
Do you have to use those segments in a certain amount of time?
You have, I think, 90 days.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's longer. I don't have the information in front of me, but the importance of that is that my experience, I actually flew to New Orleans to take the train on February 1st as part of my book journey, is that it's a direct 20 hours from New Orleans to Chicago. You don't get to get off the train, except for smoke stops and maybe a half-hour break to get off the train. But otherwise, you can't get off and explore the cities.
I remember that scene. Charles, get back in here, Charles.
Exactly.
Charles, we're leaving.
and the point of that is that the experience was on the train. The interactions with the people were on the train, primarily for the 20 or 30 hours that he's en route from New Orleans to Chicago. And if that's your purpose, I've talked to people. I've got another friend who has taken the rail purposely to be isolated, to be able to have books, to be able to have quiet time to himself. And if that's what you want to experience for that 20 and turn off your phone, that's terrific. But the interactions that I had, I met a fellow from Toronto on the train from New Orleans to Chicago. He didn't get written into the book. His name's Scott, but Scott had an ear infection and had flown to New Orleans to see his son, but couldn't take an air flight back because he felt that he was going to pop his ears. Right. And so he looked for an option. And much like my character ended up at the train station, he and I spent the entire time talking about sports and talking about life. And that was a really good experience. Jessica's character was not written around an individual, but very well could have been. Met a woman on the train who was going from Jackson, Mississippi up to see her boyfriend a couple of hours later. She rides the train on a regular basis. And she could very well have been written into the book. but these are people that are real life individuals. If I had
Those
said,
guys, do those people, Dave, do those people know that they missed it by that much being in that book?
oh, they do, and the reason that they do is that the book was done, written by December 1st. This was February 1st, 2 months later, and so I had text in my hand. I had printed copy that I could show them and say, here, read a page or two. The summary had already been created, and again, it was the interaction with those people. Even the Amtrak staff were amazing to interact with on that train. But you have to choose to do so, and we each have our lives. Whether we're on a train or whether we're at a bus station or whether we're just going through our lives, we have a choice to interact or we have a choice to not interact.
Dave, I got a home run for you.
All right, I'm ready.
You should contact Amtrak and they should use this in their sales meetings.
Well, if you would like to do so on my behalf, I've gone up to the executive vice president level, and they have some corporate corporate decisions that were made. I did approach them, and they chose not to.
Well,
Really?
they have. So there's a federal.
Gosh, that would be a perfect sales training. I mean, even for someone who books reservations, to talk about the journey, to be able to talk about it at that level. I mean, oh my God.
Well, if you want to write to them, you can write that in your review. Amtrak should use the.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
So another question I had, Dave, this short sleep thing, is that a real thing? I didn't look it up. Maybe I should have, but
yeah, there's
and that whole chapter about the 30 hours, if God gave you 30 hours, would you still sleep? What is it? 6 or so what? So is it a short sleep thing a thing, or did you make that up? And
no,
do you have it?
It's a real thing. And in fact, in the back of the book, in the reference section, I put a hyperlink to the study that was done in California, UC San Francisco, I believe. And there's a genetic defect. There's a mutation within one of the genes that requires less sleep. And actually, I went to a sleep expert in Indianapolis who recommended the book, Dr. Singh, Abhinav Singh, and he had recently written a similar kind of book. It's very interactive about sleep disorders. He didn't address short sleeper syndrome, but when I approached him about it, he said it's so rare that it gets confused with other sleep disorders. And he said you have to be very careful about that. In my research, I came to find out this is something that takes place from childhood. It can be masked as a lot of things, but in the end, it comes through as positivity. It comes back as only needing 4 or 5 hours of sleep required, and it's deep sleep, and it wakes you up refreshed. And so I wrote that into the book, and hope to talk about it with people like yourselves more, because the challenge is we all want to get more done. Mark, you mentioned it early. We want to get more stuff done, and the only way to expand the 24-hour idea is to have God do that, to have God expand to a 30-hour day. And we all recognize that's not going to be the case. Time stopped yesterday. The timing of for 4 minutes or 3 minutes or 2 minutes with the eclipse allowed time to stop. Oh, and people stopped their lives for that 4 or 5 minutes.
Hey, we're down, Dave, we're down to 2 minutes. I got a quick question. And then first of all, we're going to stare at the screen as if I'm taking a picture and smile. All right. Is there any sequels in the plan? Is there a backup book?
Jackson's got his own book.
Well, I might write Jackson into the next book, but the reality is I had text written for a book around 1914, and I've written lessons, and I've actually given lessons about specific events going that from the modern sales and marketing methods book. And so my sequel will likely include the lessons that come from that book, because they're not in.
I thought you mentioned in that book, I thought you mentioned early on in your book that we still practice these conceits from 1914.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's many things that sales managers and salespeople do. In fact, I talked to a professor in New Hampshire that wrote a 400-page book. I've got it here about traveling salesmen and the life of the traveling salesman. And there's a segment about turn of the century to 1921 salespeople.
Hey, I hate to break it, but it's going to shut us off here in a few seconds. And maybe this is a second podcast.
I want to talk to him about chambers of commerce. So
too
Dave,
late. We got to say goodbye. It's going to cut us off. Thank you, Dave.
Cheers.
We'll do a
Dave.
second session with you, brother.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good. 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 Enough. As good enough.